I thank you for you answered me. You have been my Savior. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord has this been done. It is wonderful in our eyes. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Lord, grant salvation. Lord, grant good fortune.
Welcome, beloved ones. Tonight, we continue our journey through Psalm 45, looking at the Messianic bride in woven gold through the Peshitta, the Ethiopian witness, an ancient Jewish interpretation. This is a beautiful and deep study, so settle in and let us enter the royal mystery together. There is a royal song in the Scriptures that grows brighter the deeper it is heard, because Psalm 45 not only speaks of a king and a bride in earthly splendor, it also opens into a messianic vision when listened to through the older witnesses. In one ancient Jewish interpretive stream, the Targum does not leave the king as an ordinary ruler only, but renders the opening in explicitly messianic language, "Your beauty, O King Messiah." So from an early Jewish side, the psalm was already heard as opening toward the anointed king. And once that royal figure is heard in messianic light, the bride beside him becomes even more luminous. In the Peshitta, the daughter is called, "Hear, my daughter, and see, and incline your ear." And then the king delights in her beauty. The order matters. Hearing comes first, then beauty, then delight. The bride is not presented as self-made glory. She is the one who has turned, received, and been formed for the king. Then the older psalm tradition preserves another very precious detail. The queen is described not simply in plain gold, but in clothing interwoven with gold, adorned in richness and varied beauty. That wording is powerful because it gives the garment a sense of deliberate formation. The gold is not merely laid upon her, it has been worked into the garment itself. Beauty here is not accidental. It is shaped, ordered, and prepared. The Ethiopian witness stands in harmony with this royal atmosphere. The queen appears in golden, adorned garments, and the psalm moves toward a joyful entrance into the palace. So the ancient streams begin to illuminate one another. The Peshitta emphasizes inward turning. The older psalm tradition emphasizes the woven gold, and the Ethiopian witness preserves the queen's adorned nearness and joyful entrance. Together they reveal a bride who is not merely admired from a distance, but prepared for royal presence. And this is why the garment becomes so important in a messianic reading. If the king is heard as Messiah in the ancient Jewish witness, then the bride's woven gold cannot be reduced to decoration alone. It begins to speak of covenant beauty, of royal preparation, of a people made ready to stand beside the Anointed One. The garment is not vanity, it is testimony. It is the visible form of something the king himself has prepared. This is where the older Jewish streams around covenant and marriage deepen the picture. In the midrashic world around Isaiah 54, Torah is heard in relation to betrothal and the dwelling in relation to marriage. So instruction, covenant, and dwelling are not left isolated from bridal language. They begin to move toward one another. The gift from God leads toward union, and the dwelling of God among his people is heard in nuptial terms. That means the bride in Psalm 45 can be heard within a wider ancient pattern. She is not simply a royal ornament at court. She belongs to the mystery of covenant nearness. She belongs to the pattern in which what comes from God draws his people toward union, preparation, and dwelling. The gold around her is not empty splendor. It belongs to a holy order, a royal order, a messianic order. And this is why some later, flatter readings can miss the depth of the psalm. When the older witnesses are allowed to speak first, the language becomes richer. The daughter is called to hear and incline her ear. The king is heard in messianic light. The queen's clothing is interwoven with gold. The palace is entered with joy. The old Jewish bridal and covenant patterns gather quietly around the scene. The psalm begins to sound less like a passing court lyric and more like a royal revelation of the Messiah and the bride made ready for him. So the woven gold begins to speak in a very deep way. Gold in Scripture belongs near what is precious, holy, and set apart. But woven gold says more than preciousness alone. It speaks of beauty worked through order. It speaks of a glory that has been formed thread by thread. And that is why the bride is so profound here, because she is not merely the beloved one beside the Messiah. She is the one whose beauty bears the mark of preparation. Her garment is the sign that what stands beside the king has been fashioned with intention. This is also why the Peshitta remains so precious to the study. The bride is not first shown weaving her own glory. She is first summoned to hear. Hearing comes before visible beauty, so the garment may be heard as the visible flowering of inward reception. The ear bends toward the king, the heart yields, and then the royal beauty appears. The woven gold becomes the outward sign of what has first been received inwardly. And then the palace joy of the ancient witnesses gives the final touch to the opening image. The bride is not clothed for distance, she is clothed for nearness. She is not adorned for isolation, she is adorned for the entrance, the golden garment, the royal place. The joyful movement, all of it says the same thing. The Messiah's bride is not accidental to the kingdom. She is prepared for it. She is brought into it. She is formed for it. So the psalm opens in a way that is both ancient and luminous. The king is heard in messianic light. The bride is summoned to hear. The beauty is formed. The gold is woven. And the palace receives the prepared one with joy. This is not merely a song of ancient royalty. It is a royal mystery of the Messiah and the bride, heard through the older witnesses. The deeper one listens, the more the woven gold reveals a beauty prepared by the king himself. And because the woven gold reveals a beauty prepared by the king himself, another depth opens. The garment is not only a sign of splendor, but also a sign of formation. What is woven is not instantaneous. It is gathered, ordered, joined, and brought into harmony. Thread answers thread, pattern answers pattern. The beauty of the garment comes through arrangement, and that is why the queen's clothing in the older witness carries such weight. It suggests that what stands beside the Messiah has not appeared in haste, but has been formed with intention. This makes the bride in Psalm 45 even more luminous, because she is not only near the king, but also bears the marks of preparation. Her beauty is not random brightness, it is ordered beauty. It is beauty that is passed through hearing, yielding, and royal shaping. In the Peshitta, the daughter is first called to hear, to see, and to incline her ear, and only then does the king delight in her beauty. That order is precious because it shows that the garment belongs to a deeper mystery, inward response before outward glory. So the woven gold can be heard as the visible sign of what the king has formed through inward reception. The ear bends toward him, the heart receives what comes from him, and the life begins to take on a beauty that did not originate in itself. The bride does not stand beside the Messiah, clothed in self-made radiance. She appears in a beauty shaped through covenant nearness. That is why the garment matters so deeply. It is not only what she wears, it is what her preparation has become in visible form. Then the Ethiopian witness adds even greater royal atmosphere, as the queen is seen in golden, adorned garments, and the psalm's movement carries forward into a joyful entrance. The garment belongs to a house, to a palace, to a procession, to a kingdom. So the beauty of the bride is not detached beauty, and it is not a private ornament. It belongs to the order of the king's house. It belongs to the joy of royal nearness. And this is where the older Jewish interpretive world deepens the messianic reading from another side. If the Targum can hear the king as King Messiah, and if the midrashic tradition around Isaiah 54 can hear Torah in relation to betrothal and the dwelling in relation to marriage, then Psalm 45 begins to shine as part of a larger ancient pattern, the Messiah, the bride, the covenant, and the dwelling all moving toward one royal mystery. The garment then becomes more than courtly clothing. It becomes the sign of a people prepared for covenant nearness to the anointed king. This is why the woven gold should not be heard in a shallow way. Gold in Scripture belongs near what is precious and holy, but woven gold says something finer still. It says that beauty has been worked through relation, design, skill, and order. And that belongs beautifully to the bride, because the bride is not merely chosen, she is prepared. She is not merely desired, she is formed. She is not merely near, she is made fit for nearness. So another layer begins to shine. The garment is the outward witness that the bride has passed through the king's ordering. What she bears visibly reflects what has already taken place invisibly. The woven threads suggest that her beauty is the result of gathering, joining, and shaping. In that sense, the garment itself begins to tell the story of the bride. She is the one in whom the royal work of the king has become visible, and that is why the psalm feels so full of depth when heard through the older witnesses. The king is heard in messianic light. The daughter is called to hear. The queen stands in woven gold. The palace receives the prepared one with joy. The bridal and covenant patterns from the older Jewish streams stand quietly nearby. All of it gathers around one luminous reality. The Messiah's bride is not accidental to the kingdom. She is shaped for it, adorned for it, and brought into it with beauty prepared by the king himself. And, because she is brought into it with beauty prepared by the king himself, another depth begins to open. The woven gold is not only the sign of preparation, it is the sign of belonging. What is woven into the garment is no longer something lying outside it. It has entered the very fabric. It has become part of what the garment is. And that is why this image is so powerful for the bride, because it suggests more than adornment laid upon the surface. It suggests a beauty that has entered the fabric of her being, a royal belonging that is no longer external only, but has become part of her visible identity. This is why the garment can be heard as such a profound messianic sign. If the king is heard in the ancient Jewish witness as King Messiah, then the bride's woven gold begins to speak not merely of palace luxury, but of a people whose identity has been shaped in relation to the Messiah himself. The gold is not casual. It belongs to the royal sphere. It belongs to what stands near the throne. It belongs to the order of the king's own house. So the bride does not appear as one merely visiting the kingdom. She appears as one who belongs to its beauty. And this gives even greater weight to the Peshitta, because the daughter is first summoned to hear, to see, and to incline her ear. Belonging begins in reception. It begins when the inward life turns toward the king deeply enough that what comes from him no longer remains foreign. The ear opens, the heart yields, and then beauty begins to appear. So the woven garment is not simply the reward of hearing, it is the sign that hearing has gone so deep that life has begun to take on the shape of the king's own order. Then the Ethiopian witness continues to strengthen the same mystery, because the queen is not only in golden garments, she is adorned and brought toward the palace in joy. The image is full of settled welcome. It is not the beauty of uncertainty. It is the beauty of one being received in the place for which she has been made ready. And that is why the garment shines with such royal peace. It belongs to the entrance. It belongs to nearness. It belongs to the joy of a house that receives its own. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns continue to cast their light. If the midrashic line on Isaiah 54 can hear Torah in relation to betrothal and the dwelling in relation to marriage, then belonging itself begins to appear as a covenant reality. The gift from God moves toward union, and union moves toward dwelling. So the bride's garment can be heard as the visible sign that covenant belonging has ripened into royal nearness. She is not simply decorated. She is marked by a relationship. So another layer begins to shine. The woven gold is the sign that the bride has not only been prepared by the king, she has been claimed into his own royal order. What was once outside has entered the fabric. What was once a call has become an identity. What was once an invitation has become a belonging. That is why the image feels so full of dignity. The bride's beauty is not borrowed beauty in a shallow sense. It is covenant beauty that has become part of her visible form. And this makes the psalm even more luminous in messianic light, because the Messiah is not simply surrounded by splendor. He is joined to a bride whose very appearance witnesses that she has been brought into the order of his house. The woven gold says that nearness has left its mark. The royal place has shaped what is seen. The belonging has become visible. And that is why the bride can stand at his right hand in beauty without that beauty feeling accidental, because it is the beauty of one who has been formed for the Messiah's own dwelling in joy. So the song continues to deepen. The king is heard in messianic light. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen appears in woven and golden splendor in the older witnesses. The palace joy shines in the Ethiopian tradition, and the ancient Jewish bridal patterns gather quietly around the whole scene. Together, they reveal a bride whose beauty is not only lovely, but also covenantal, royal, and full of belonging before the face of the Messiah. And because her beauty is covenantal, royal, and full of belonging before the face of the Messiah, another depth begins to open. The woven gold is not only the sign of belonging, it is the sign of union without confusion. The gold and enters the garment, yet the garment remains a garment. The beauty is enriched, interwoven, and transformed, but not dissolved. And that is a very fine and holy image for the bride, because it suggests nearness so deep that the life of the king leaves its mark, while the bride still stands in her own distinct beauty before him. This makes the Messianic reading even more luminous, because if the ancient Jewish witness can hear the king as King Messiah, then the woven garment begins to reveal what it means for the bride to stand in relation to him. She's not swallowed up into abstraction. She's not reduced to a vague symbol. She's made radiant through nearness. The royal order of the Messiah enters the fabric of her beauty, and yet she remains the bride who stands beside him, distinct, adorned, and full of prepared glory. This is why the Peshitta is so precious here, because the daughter is first called to hear, to see, and to incline her ear. Union begins in a rightly ordered relation. It begins in reception, in response, in turning toward the king. So when the beauty later appears, it is not the result of confusion between the king and the bride. It is the result of a relation so deep that what comes from the king begins to shape what is seen in the bride. Her beauty is the fruit of nearness, not the loss of identity. Then the Ethiopian witness strengthens the same mystery, because the queen is adorned in golden garments and is brought in joy toward the palace. The scene is full of harmony, yet not vague. The king is the king, the queen is the queen, the palace is the palace, and yet all of it stands in ordered nearness. So the joy of the house is not the erasing of distinction, but the bringing of all things into their right beauty under the reign of the king. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns continue to deepen the image. If Torah can be heard in the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54 in relation to betrothal, and the dwelling in relation to marriage, then covenant union itself is shown as ordered rather than confused. Betrothal does not destroy distinction, and marriage does not abolish relation. Rather, the relation reaches its intended fullness. So the woven gold in Psalm 45 can be heard as the sign that the bride has entered the fullness of royal covenant nearness without losing the dignity of being the bride. So another layer begins to shine. The woven garment is the sign that the bride has been joined to the Messiah in a way that transforms her beauty without dissolving her identity. What comes from him enters the fabric of what she bears, and yet she remains the one who stands at his right hand. Her glory is relational glory. Her beauty is received beauty. Her splendor is the sign of union rightly ordered, and that makes the psalm even more profound, because the bride is not only prepared, not only adorned, not only belonging, she's also the living sign that covenant union can produce deep transformation without confusion. She is the one in whom nearness has become visible, yet the relation itself remains luminous and intact. The king delights in her beauty, and her beauty witnesses that she has been shaped by his royal nearness while still standing before him as the bride. So the royal song continues to deepen in messianic light. The king is heard as Messiah in the ancient Jewish witness. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen appears in woven and golden splendor in the older psalm tradition. The joy of the palace shines in the Ethiopian witness. And the ancient Jewish bridal patterns continue to gather quietly around the whole image. Together they reveal a union that is rich, ordered, transforming, and full of holy distinction. The Messiah in his royal beauty, and the bride beside him in woven gold, marked by the nearness that has made her radiant. And because the nearness has made her radiant, another depth begins to open. The woven gold is not only the sign of union rightly ordered, it is the sign of royal participation. The bride does not stand beside the Messiah as a distant spectator to his glory. She stands within the atmosphere of his reign, marked by its beauty, clothed in relation to it, and brought into its joy. The garment says that what belongs to the king's house has begun to touch her own visible form. She stands near enough that the dignity of the kingdom has left its imprint upon her. This gives a very fine light to the older witnesses. The king is heard in messianic language in the ancient Jewish stream. The daughter in the Peshitta is summoned to hear and incline her ear, and the queen in the older psalm tradition appears in gold interwoven and adorned. So the movement is not from distance to mere observation. It is from hearing into participation. The bride receives, is formed, and then stands in a beauty that bears witness to the royal order into which she has been brought. Then the Ethiopian witness strengthens this royal participation with its atmosphere of glad entrance, because the queen is not merely admired outside the palace. She is brought into the house with joy. The beauty belongs to the entrance. The adornment belongs to nearness. The whole company moves within the sphere of the king's own dwelling. So the garment becomes the sign that the bride is not outside the reign of the king looking inward, but inside the joy of his royal house. This is why the woven gold can be heard as more than an ornament, because an ornament may be placed upon someone without changing their relation to the house. But what is woven into the garment suggests something more inward and more settled. It suggests that the bride's visible identity now carries the imprint of the realm she has entered. The glory of the king's order has not remained external to her. It has touched what she bears, and this is where the older Jewish covenant and bridal patterns continue to cast their light. If Torah may be heard in the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54 in relation to betrothal and the dwelling in relation to marriage, then participation in the king's house is not a secondary idea. It belongs to the mystery of the covenant itself. What God gives leads toward shared dwelling, shared order, shared life under his reign. So the bride's woven gold may be heard as the visible sign that the covenant has ripened into participation in the joy and dignity of the Messiah's own house. So another layer begins to shine. The garment is the sign that the bride has not only been prepared for the Messiah, but has been brought into the beauty of his kingdom. Her splendor is not isolated splendor. It is participatory splendor. It shows that royal nearness has become more than approach. It has become a shared atmosphere, a shared joy, a shared belonging under the reign of the king. And that makes the psalm even more luminous, because the bride is not only hearing, not only prepared, not only belonging, not only transformed without confusion, she is also participating in the royal life of the Messiah's house. The king's glory remains his own, and yet the bride stands in a beauty that witnesses that his kingdom has received her and marked her. That is why her garment matters so deeply. It tells the story of nearness that has become participation. So the royal song continues to unfold in messianic light. The king is heard as Messiah in the ancient Jewish witness. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen stands in woven and golden glory in the older psalm tradition. The palace joy shines in the Ethiopian witness, and the ancient bridal and covenant patterns remain quietly gathered around the whole scene. Together they reveal a bride whose beauty is not passive but participatory, a bride brought near enough to bear in visible form the joy, dignity, and ordered splendor of the Messiah's own house. And because the ordered splendor of the Messiah's own house has begun to mark her visible form, another depth begins to open. The woven gold is not only the sign of royal participation, it is the sign of honor received through nearness. The bride does not stand at the right hand of the king as one who has adorned herself for self-exaltation. She stands there because the king has given her a place, and the garment bears witness to that gift. The gold, the adornment, the right hand, the joy of the palace, all of it says the same thing. Honor has come to rest upon the one whom the king has brought near. This makes the psalm even more luminous in messianic light, because if the ancient Jewish witness can hear the king as King Messiah, then the queen's beauty cannot be heard as vanity or mere courtly display. It becomes the sign that what the Messiah draws near to himself, he also clothes with dignity. The honor of the king does not remain sealed within himself. It is reflected, in ordered measure, upon the bride who stands beside him. And this is why the Peshitta remains so precious here, because the daughter is first called to hear, to see, and to incline her ear. Honor comes after hearing. Nearness comes after inward turning. The beauty that the king delights in is not detached from relation to him. So the place at his right hand, and the splendor that appears there, can be heard as the fruit of a life that has answered his voice deeply enough to be brought into royal favor. Then the Ethiopian witness continues to heighten the atmosphere of honor as the queen is adorned in golden garments and brought into the palace with joy. The scene is not strained. It is celebratory, ordered, and full of welcome. Honor here is not seized. It is bestowed. The palace receives her, and the gladness of the house surrounds the one who has been made ready for this place. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns quietly deepen the image once more. If Torah may be heard in the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54 in relation to betrothal and the dwelling in relation to marriage, then honor itself begins to appear as covenantal. It is not the honor of self-display. It is the honor of a relationship rightly established, of nearness rightly given, of a place in the house that comes through union with what God has appointed. So the woven gold may be heard as the visible witness that covenant nearness has matured into royal dignity. So another layer begins to shine. The garment is the sign that the bride has not only been brought near to the Messiah, but also honored by that nearness. Her beauty is dignified beauty. Her adornment is received adornment. Her place is not accidental, and her radiance is not self-invented. It is the radiance of one upon whom the king has allowed his favor to rest. And that gives the psalm another very tender strength, because the bride is not only prepared, not only belonging, not only participating, she is also the one whom the Messiah delights to honor before his own house. The woven gold becomes the sign that the kingdom has not merely admitted her, but it has clothed her with visible dignity. Her beauty is the answer to the king's pleasure resting upon what he has prepared. So the royal song continues to deepen in ancient light. The king is heard as Messiah, the daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta, the queen appears in adorned in golden beauty in the older witnesses, the palace joy shines in the Ethiopian tradition, and the ancient Jewish bridal patterns continue to give the whole image covenantal depth. Together they reveal a bride whose woven gold is not only splendor but honor, the visible dignity of one who has been brought near, received with joy, and allowed to stand at the right hand of the Messiah in beauty prepared by the king himself. And because she is allowed to stand at the right hand of the Messiah in beauty prepared by the king himself, another depth begins to open. The woven gold is not only the sign of honor received through nearness, it is the sign of public witness. The bride does not stand hidden in a private chamber with her beauty concealed. She stands where her nearness to the king can be seen. The right hand is a place of visibility, and the garment is part of that witness. What the king has prepared in secret now appears before the house in ordered glory. This is why the psalm feels so weighty in Messianic light, because if the king is heard in the ancient Jewish stream as King Messiah, then the bride's place beside him becomes more than courtly imagery. It becomes testimony. The one who stands near the Messiah bears visible witness to what his favor does, what his house gives, and what his nearness forms. The woven gold does not merely beautify her, it proclaims that the king's delight has become visible. And this deepens the Peshitta in a very beautiful way, because the daughter's hearing is not left as an inward event known only to herself. She hears, inclines her ear, and then the king delights in her beauty. So what began in a secret response comes to visible expression. The inward turning does not remain buried. It flowers into something visible. That is why the bride's beauty has been witnessed within it. It reveals the fruit of hearing. Then the Ethiopian witness strengthens the same mystery from the side of royal manifestation, because the queen is adorned, the company moves with gladness, and the palace receives them in joy. This is not a secret favor. It is favor made visible within the ordered life of the king's own house. The house sees the one who has been brought near. The joy of the procession makes public what the king has prepared. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns quietly add still more light. If Torah in the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54 leans toward betrothal and the dwelling toward marriage, then the covenant itself is moving toward manifested relation, toward a bond that does not remain abstract or unspoken. So the bride's woven gold may be heard as the visible sign of covenant relation brought into the open, honored, established, and witnessed within the king's house. So another layer begins to shine. The garment is the sign that the bride has become a public witness of the Messiah's favor. Her beauty is not private beauty. Her honor is not a secret honor. Her place at the right hand reveals before the house what the Messiah has done with the one he has called near. The woven gold becomes proclamation in visible form. And that gives the psalm another tenderness, because the bride is not displayed as an object of spectacle. She is displayed as the beloved dignity of the king's own joy. The witness is relational, the splendor is covenantal, the public beauty does not diminish intimacy, it reveals it. What has been formed in nearness is allowed to stand in light. So the royal song continues to deepen. The king is heard as Messiah in the ancient Jewish witness. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen appears in woven and golden beauty in the older psalm tradition. The palace joy shines in the Ethiopian tradition. And the older Jewish bridal patterns continue to give the whole image covenantal depth. Together they reveal a bride whose woven gold is not only honor and belonging, but witness. And because she is allowed to stand at the right hand of the Messiah in beauty prepared by the king himself, another depth opens. The woven gold is not only the sign of honor received through nearness, but also the sign of royal trust. The bride is not placed near the king as though nearness were an empty ceremony. The right hand in Scripture is the place of favor, strength, and ordered dignity. So when the queen stands there in the ancient royal song, the image speaks of a place granted, a nearness entrusted, and a beauty that belongs within the order of the king's own house. This gives the Messianic reading even greater weight, because if the older Jewish witness can hear the king as King Messiah, then the bride at his right hand cannot be heard as a passing ornament of the court. She becomes the sign that what the Messiah brings near is also entrusted with a royal place. Her woven gold does not speak only of admiration. It speaks of a nearness stable enough to bear dignity in the king's presence. And this is why the Peshitta remains so precious to the mystery, because the daughter is first summoned to hear, to see, and to incline her ear. Trust follows hearing. Royal nearness follows inward turning. The one who is called to hear is gradually made fit to stand near. So the right-hand place can be heard as the fruit of a life that has answered the king deeply enough to be brought into his own ordered confidence. Then the Ethiopian witness continues to reinforce the same atmosphere as the queen is adorned in golden garments and brought into the palace with joy. The scene is full of settled welcome. Nothing in it suggests uncertainty, distance, or hesitation. The palace receives the adorned one as belonging within its joy. That is why the garment shines with more than beauty alone. It shines with acceptance, with established place, with the peace of one welcomed into the king's own order. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns deepen the image once again. If the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54 can hear Torah in relation to betrothal and the dwelling in relation to marriage, then royal trust itself begins to appear as covenantal. It is not a bare promotion. It is not an isolated privilege. It is the dignity that comes when relation has reached maturity, when nearness has become established, and when the house receives the one made ready for it. So, the woven gold may be heard as the visible sign that covenant nearness has ripened into a trusted place within the royal dwelling. So, another layer begins to shine. The garment is the sign that the bride has not only been brought near to the Messiah, honored by that nearness, and marked by the splendor of his house, but also been given a place within the order of his joy. Her beauty is not wandering beauty. It is placed beauty. Her dignity is not uncertain dignity. It is an established dignity. Her woven gold becomes the witness that the king's house has received her in more than passing delight. It has received her in order of trust. And that makes the psalm still more luminous because the bride is not only prepared, not only belonging, not only participating, not only honored, she is also the one in whom nearness has become stable enough to bear royal place. The Messiah delights in her beauty, and that beauty is joined to a position, to a right-hand nearness, to a visible dignity that tells the story of trust granted by the king. So the royal song continues to deepen in ancient light. The king is heard as Messiah. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen appears in woven and adorned golden beauty in the older witnesses. The palace joy shines in the Ethiopian tradition. And the ancient Jewish bridal patterns continue to give covenant depth to the whole image. Together, they reveal a bride whose woven gold is not only splendor, honor, and belonging, but trusted nearness, the visible sign of one whom the Messiah has brought close, clothed with dignity, and established within the ordered joy of his own house. And because her woven gold has become witness, another depth begins to open. The bride is not only seen, she is remembered. Psalm 45 does not let the royal beauty dissolve into a passing moment, because the song itself moves toward remembrance in all generations. So the bride's witness is not that of an hour only. It enters memory. It enters the life of the house. It enters the ongoing praise that surrounds the king. What has been made visible before him is meant to endure as a testimony that does not fade when the first moment of wonder has passed. This makes the Messianic reading even more luminous, because if the ancient Jewish witness can hear the king as King Messiah, then the bride standing beside him in woven gold becomes part of a royal memory that belongs to the Messiah's own glory. Her visible beauty is not detached from his reign. It becomes one of the ways the goodness of his house is made known. The garment says that what the Messiah draws near to himself does not remain in obscurity. It is brought into remembrance within the life of the kingdom. And this gives another beautiful weight to the Peshitta, because the daughter's hearing is not left behind once the beauty appears. The hearing remains inside the beauty as its veiled root. So when the king delights in her, and when the royal song allows that delight to stand in the open, what is being remembered is not only outward splendor, it is the whole mystery by which inward response has flowered into visible glory. The memory itself bears witness to the fruit of hearing. Then the Ethiopian witness strengthens the same mystery from the side of celebration, because the queen is adorned, the company enters with gladness, and the palace receives them in joy. Joy is one of the ways memory is sealed in the life of a house. The glad entrance, the ordered procession, the visible nearness, all of it turns the bride's beauty into something more than appearance. It becomes a royal event, a joy-bearing testimony within the king's own dwelling. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns add another quiet light. If Torah, in the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54, leans toward betrothal and the dwelling toward marriage, then remembrance itself belongs to covenant life. Betrothal is remembered, marriage is remembered, dwelling is remembered. So the bride's woven gold may be heard as the visible sign of a covenant relation not meant to disappear into abstraction, but to remain before the house as an enduring testimony of what has been established. So another layer begins to shine. The garment is the sign that the bride has become not only a public witness of the Messiah's favor, but also an enduring remembrance of it. Her beauty is not momentary beauty. Her honor is not passing honor. Her place at the right hand enters the song itself, and the song carries her witness forward. The woven gold becomes memory made radiant. And that gives the psalm another tenderness, because the bride is not remembered as a separate glory competing with the king. She is remembered within the joy of his reign. Her beauty remains relational. Her honor remains covenantal. Her remembrance continues to say what the king's nearness does, what his delight forms, and what his house is like when it receives the one he has made ready. So the royal song continues to deepen. The king is heard as Messiah in the ancient Jewish witness. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen appears in woven and golden beauty in the older psalm tradition. The palace joy shines in the Ethiopian tradition, and the older Jewish bridal patterns continue to give the whole image covenant depth. Together they reveal a bride whose woven gold is not only honor, belonging, and witness, but remembrance, the visible beauty of one whose nearness to the Messiah has been allowed to remain in the praise and memory of the king's own house. And because her nearness to the Messiah has been allowed to remain in the praise and memory of the king's own house, another depth that begins to open. Remembrance is not the end of the mystery. It becomes inheritance of vision. What is remembered in the house begins to shape what the house sees, loves, and hopes for. The bride in woven gold does not remain only a royal image from 1 hour of splendor. She becomes part of the enduring vision of the kingdom, part of the way the house learns to recognize the beauty of covenant nearness, part of the way royal joy is carried forward in living memory. This makes the Messianic reading even more luminous, because if the king is heard in the ancient Jewish witness as King Messiah, then the bride standing beside him in visible beauty becomes more than an ornament of the moment. She becomes part of the kingdom's remembered pattern, a witness to what the Messiah delights to prepare, what he allows to stand near him, and what his reign makes beautiful. Her woven gold becomes not only testimony, but a kind of inheritance for the eyes of the house. And this gives another beautiful layer to the Peshitta, because the daughter's hearing remains hidden inside the whole vision. The king delights in her beauty, but that beauty can never be separated from the ear that first inclined toward him. So what is remembered in the house is not only outward glory, it is the mystery that hearing can become beauty, that response can become nearness, and that the life turned toward the king can come to bear a visible splendor before him. Then the Ethiopian witness continues to strengthen the same movement as the adorned queen enters the palace with the company in joy. Joy shared in the house becomes part of what the house carries onward. The ordered procession, the glad entrance, the golden garments, these do not merely dazzle for a moment. They shape the atmosphere of the kingdom's own remembrance. They tell the house what it looks like when the king receives the one he has prepared. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns continue to add their quiet strength. If Torah, in the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54, leans toward betrothal and the dwelling toward marriage, then the covenant itself is not only an event, but an enduring relation. Betrothal leaves a mark on hope, marriage leaves a mark on the house, and dwelling leaves a mark on memory. So the bride's woven gold may be heard as part of that same lasting pattern, the visible beauty of covenant relation entering the shared vision of the people. So another layer begins to shine. The garment is the sign that the bride has become not only witness and remembrance, but inheritance of vision. Her beauty teaches the house what royal nearness looks like. Her place at the right hand teaches the house what covenant honor looks like. Her woven gold teaches the house what the Messiah's favor looks like when it has taken visible form. And that gives the psalm another tenderness, because the bride is not remembered merely as an object of admiration. She becomes part of the kingdom's own way of seeing. Her beauty continues to speak. Her nearness continues to infuse the house with joy. Her woven gold continues to declare that what the Messiah prepares is not only lovely for a moment, but worthy to shape the long memory and hope of his people. So the royal song continues to deepen in ancient light. The king is heard as Messiah in the older Jewish witness. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen appears in woven and golden splendor in the older psalm tradition. The palace joy shines in the Ethiopian tradition, and the older Jewish bridal patterns continue to give the whole image covenant depth. Together, they reveal a bride whose woven gold is not only honor, witness, and remembrance, but a lasting vision within the Messiah's house, the visible beauty by which the kingdom learns again and again what his nearness prepares. And because the kingdom learns again and again what his nearness prepares, another depth begins to open. The woven gold is not only a lasting vision within the Messiah's house, it becomes a pattern of expectation. What the house has seen in the bride begins to shape what the house awaits from the king. The memory of her beauty does not remain behind as something admired only in the past. It begins to work forward. It teaches the heart to expect that what the Messiah prepares will be radiant, ordered, and full of covenant joy. This gives the Messianic reading another tender strength, because if the king is heard in the older Jewish witness as King Messiah, then the bride standing beside him in woven gold becomes part of the kingdom's own expectation of his goodness. She is not merely proof of what he once did. She becomes a sign of what his reign is like, what his favor produces, and what his nearness continues to form. Her beauty brings hope, and this gives another beautiful weight to the Peshitta, because the daughter's hearing remains at the root of the whole image. What the house expects from the Messiah is not detached from that first inward turning. Hear, my daughter, and see, and incline your ear. So expectation itself is shaped by the knowledge that the king forms beauty through relation, through response, through a life that bends toward him. The vision of the bride teaches the house not only what to admire, but how royal beauty begins. Then the Ethiopian witness continues to strengthen the same mystery, because the adorned queen does not appear in isolation. She enters the palace with gladness, and the house receives her in joy. So the expectation formed by the bride is not only the expectation of splendor, it is the expectation of shared joy, ordered entrance, and belonging in the king's own dwelling. The house learns from her beauty what it means for the king to receive what he has prepared. This is where the older Jewish bridal and covenant patterns continue to cast their light. If Torah in the midrashic stream on Isaiah 54 leans toward betrothal and the dwelling toward marriage, then expectation itself belongs to the covenant mystery. Betrothal creates expectation, marriage fulfills expectations, dwelling sustains expectation in living form. So the bride's woven gold may be heard as part of that same holy pattern, the visible beauty that teaches the house to await the fullness of covenant joy. So another layer begins to shine. The garment is the sign that the bride has become not only a witness, remembrance, and inheritance of vision, but a pattern of expectation within the Messiah's house. Her beauty tells the house what to hope for. Her place at the right hand tells the house what nearness may become. Her woven gold tells the house that the Messiah's favor does not produce confusion or emptiness, but ordered radiance, covenant dignity, and joy. And that gives the psalm another sweetness, because the bride is not only looked upon, she quietly teaches the house to long rightly. Her beauty does not turn the eyes toward vanity. It turns them toward the goodness of the king who has prepared her. Her nearness does not close hope down into one scene. It opens hope outward, because what has been seen beside the Messiah becomes a living assurance of what his reign delights to bring forth. So the royal song continues to deepen in ancient light. The king is heard as Messiah in the older Jewish witness. The daughter turns her ear in the Peshitta. The queen appears in woven and golden splendor in the older psalm tradition. The palace joy shines in the Ethiopian tradition. And the older Jewish bridal patterns continue to give the whole image covenant depth. Together, they reveal a bride whose woven gold is not only honor, witness, remembrance, and lasting vision, but holy expectation, the visible beauty by which the Messiah's house learns what his nearness loves to prepare. So the royal song continues to shine, and the deeper we listen, the more Psalm 45 reveals not only beauty, but a holy mystery, the Messiah, the bride, and the woven gold of covenant nearness. What is prepared by the king is not shallow splendor, but beauty formed for his presence, his house, and his joy. Thank you for being here with me. See you on the next live.